Have you ever reached the end of your day and wondered where did it all go? Not because of chaos, not because of crisis, but because it quietly slipped away. Hours lost to hesitation, to little distractions, to things left undone. It's not laziness, it's not weakness. It's simply what happens when your mind has no structure to guide it. Without order, the soul forgets its own strength. The Stoics understood this long before science gave it a name. They didn't lean on bursts of willpower or wait for fleeting motivation. They lived inside discipline, not as punishment, not as a burden, but as freedom. Discipline was their anchor, a sacred structure that kept them steady when life tried to pull them apart. This message on Stoicism Breath isn't about quick hacks or productivity checklists. It's about something deeper, reclaiming your minutes, reclaiming your focus, reclaiming yourself. These are 12 timeless laws, not rules you obey, but principles you embody.
If you've ever felt pulled in every direction except your own, stay with me. Because the way back to yourself begins with what you choose to honor. And here's the first truth: discipline is self respect made visible. Think about it. How do you treat yourself when no one's watching? Not when a boss is waiting. Not when applause is promised, but in those quiet hours where it's only you, your thoughts, your choices. That's where discipline reveals itself. It doesn't live in the public routines. It lives in the private moments, in the decision to either step forward into who you could be or to slip back into who you've always been. Discipline at its core is not about punishment. It isn't harsh. It isn't joyless. It's a mistake most people make is treating discipline like a cage. But the truth: real discipline is not a cage, it's a code. It's the quiet decision to choose what strengthens you over what merely soothes you.
Not because you're at war with yourself, but because you refuse to betray the version of you that you know you're capable of becoming. As Epictetus once said, no man is free who is not master of himself. And here's the danger: if you don't lead your own mind, someone else will. A craving will, a mood will, a distraction will. Without discipline, the loudest voice wins. And slowly, day by day, you begin to drift, not because you're weak, but because you're unanchored. Most people think discipline means guilt, shame, or force, but the Stoics saw it differently. To them, discipline was self-alignment. It's what happens when you care about your future enough to stop letting your moods make the decisions for you. It's a homecoming the moment you finally say, enough. I'm not going to keep abandoning myself. It can start with something small. Picture this: your alarm goes off at 6 a.m. You're exhausted, every muscle in your body says stay in bed.
But the night before you made a promise, not to your coach, not to a friend, to yourself. So you sit up, you breathe, you begin. That small act, invisible to everyone else, is more than a habit. It's a declaration. It's proof that your goals matter more than your excuses. That's discipline, and it's beautiful. Picture this: you've decided to take your health seriously. You're at dinner with friends. The table is full of laughter, indulgence. One more plate passed your way. One more drink offered. For a moment you feel that tug, the urge to fit in, to make things easy, to just say yes. But then you pause. You remember your deeper why. And in that instant you stay on course. That choice isn't about restriction. It's about authorship. You didn't just say no to food, you said yes to your own power. Discipline has a way of teaching others how to treat you. When you respect your own time, people notice. When you show consistency, your boundaries become clear. When you keep your word to yourself, something inside shifts. You begin to walk differently. Not louder, not harder, but more rooted. You're no longer performing. You're aligned. And alignment isn't about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about being willing to face where you've been lying to yourself. How many times have you promised you'd start tomorrow? Said this one slip didn't matter. Told yourself it's just a small delay. Discipline doesn't let you hide behind those illusions. It demands truth. And truth, while uncomfortable, is what sets you free. This is why so many avoid discipline. Not because they're lazy, but because meeting your own potential always comes with discomfort. It's easier to daydream about who you could be than to do the real work of becoming that person. But this is exactly where Stoicism enters, not as a rule book, but as a compass. It doesn't ask how you feel, it asks what is right, and then it calls you to act on that answer again and again.
Not for applause, not for image, but for integrity. If you feel discipline slipping, don't rush to find a new tactic or hack. Start with truth. Ask yourself, where have I been choosing comfort instead of commitment? Where have I been trading away my future for a moment of ease? And most importantly, what would change if I began showing up for myself the same way I show up for the people I love? Discipline isn't a trend. It isn't something you post about online. It's a way of saying I matter. My mission matters. My time matters. You don't have to get everything right. You just need to keep one promise, make one decision with intention, reclaim one morning. That's enough to begin. Because the real strength isn't in waking up at 5 a.m. The real strength is in knowing that you did exactly what you said you would do, that you built a self you can trust. And in a world full of noise and distraction, that kind of self trust isn't just rare, it's unshakable. And it's yours to build starting right now. Which brings us to the second law: build discipline that matches your nature. Discipline isn't a costume you borrow. It's not a copy and paste routine from a YouTuber, a CEO, or a Stoic quote you read online. Real discipline begins with one honest question: does this structure truly fit the shape of my life? Because if it doesn't, no matter how noble it looks on paper, it will eventually become a cage. Some people thrive on 5 a.m., alarms, cold showers, and a calendar packed back to back. For them, discipline looks like strict lines and rigid repetition. Others try that same formula and suffocate, not because they're weak, but because it doesn't match their rhythm. Forcing a poet into a soldier's uniform may hold the form, but it crushes the soul. The Stoics never taught uniformity. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire. Epictetus taught in poverty. Seneca navigated political storms while living in spiritual solitude. Their lives looked nothing alike, but their principle was the same: know your nature and live by it. Self-mastery for the Stoics wasn't about copying someone else's structure. It was about creating one from within. Imagine two people. One is a soldier, the other a writer. The soldier thrives on rigid schedules, physical drills, precision. His discipline is external order. The writer, by contrast, finds clarity in late night hours, in quiet and creative chaos. Both need discipline, but not the same kind. And that's the point. Discipline isn't about fitting into someone else's blueprint. It's about building the framework that lets you thrive. This is the trap so many of us fall into. We copy the routines that seem popular, the ones that look impressive on paper, but we never stop to ask, does this truly fit me? And when the routine collapses, we don't question the system, we blame ourselves. We call it laziness, lack of willpower, but often it's not weakness, it's mismatch. You're trying to live inside a rhythm that doesn't speak your language. Think about it. How many times have you tried to wake up at 5 a.m. because a book or a podcast insisted that's what successful people do? You push yourself, you fail, and then you carry the shame. But what if your deepest focus comes at 10 p.m., when the house is quiet, when the world has gone still? Forcing a sunrise ritual in that case isn't discipline, it's self-sabotage disguised as virtue. The Stoics believed in living according to nature. And that doesn't only mean aligning with the seasons or the stars, it means living in harmony with your inner ecosystem, your wiring, your temperament, your natural rhythm. True discipline doesn't crush that, it collaborates with it. It doesn't squeeze you into someone else's mold. It carves out a system that fits your soul and then honours that system with consistency. When you discover that rhythm, everything begins to shift. Suddenly, motivation isn't required to drag you forward. You're no longer forcing yourself to show up, you flow into action with intention. Discipline stops feeling like a fight and begins to feel like alignment, like a river pulling you in the right direction, because you've finally chosen to swim with its current. But alignment isn't an excuse. Stoic discipline still asks for structure, sacrifice, resistance. The difference is those sacrifices carry meaning when they serve a path that's truly yours. And the structure lasts because it's built around who you actually are, not who you think you're supposed to be. So pause and reflect. Have you been borrowing systems that look good but don't feel true? Have you mistaken someone else's code for your own compass? What would it look like to design a discipline that reflects your deepest nature? A system that pushes you but also respects you, one that's honest about your strengths while keeping your blind spots in view. That's the real goal, not perfection, not performance, but a personal law, a structure that holds you up instead of wearing you down. Because here's the truth, you cannot build a solid life using someone else's blueprint. You must become the architect of your own discipline. And when you do, when your structure matches your soul, something powerful emerges: momentum. And momentum is the force that carries us into the next truth about discipline. Because it's not just about routines or schedules, it's also about what you're willing to eliminate. Without order, you pay the price in silence. Disorder doesn't arrive like an explosion, it creeps in quietly. It whispers through the unanswered texts, the dishes you said you'd wash later, the workout you keep postponing. It lingers in the background noise of your mind. At first it's subtle, but slowly the weight builds. You begin to feel off balance, unsettled. You can't name it, but you know something is slipping. The Stoics recognize this clearly. Disorder is never just physical, it is spiritual. It erodes not just your productivity, but your presence, your clarity, your peace. And if left unchecked, it quietly robs you of the life you're trying to build. When your outer world is messy, your inner world cannot stay calm. If your time has no anchor, your energy drifts without direction. And when your days lack rhythm, your soul forgets what peace even feels like. This is the hidden cost of disorder. It's not just lost productivity, it's lost clarity, lost presence, lost connection to the person you're trying to become. We like to call it flexibility. We tell ourselves, I'll figure it out as I go. But here's the truth. If you don't give your time structure, the world will. And the world doesn't care about your goals. Distractions don't ask for permission. Notifications don't wait for the right moment. Chaos doesn't knock, it barges in the moment you leave the door cracked open. The danger is that you rarely feel the damage immediately. Disorder is slow. It doesn't crash into your life like a storm, it seeps in quietly like water. One day you stop journaling. The next you check your phone before you even stretch. You stop planning your days. You eat whatever's easiest. You say yes to what's convenient. You postpone what truly matters. Nothing shatters right away, but piece by piece you begin to fade quietly, invisibly. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And most of that waste isn't loud, it's quiet. It doesn't come from laziness.
It comes from lack of clarity. Without structure, you live in reaction. Your day pulls you wherever it wants. You stop steering and become a passenger in your own life, guided not by vision, but by impulse, mood, and the noise of others. That's not freedom. That's invisible slavery. But let's make one thing clear: order is not about rigidity. It's not about packing every second with tasks or micromanaging your life until there's no room to breathe. True order is about creating boundaries that protect what matters. It's about mental and emotional containers that give shape to your energy. A morning routine can be a container. So can journaling, tracking your goals, or setting a curfew for your phone. These aren't tools of control, they're tools of rescue. They save your attention from the thousand small things trying to steal it away. That is the Stoic way. Not to control the world, but to shape how we move through it.
To design an inner framework that supports growth instead of sabotaging it. Think of it like architecture for the soul. You don't eliminate chaos, you build something stronger within it. So ask yourself honestly, what small disorder have you been tolerating? What unfinished task keeps whispering at the back of your mind? What quiet distraction is draining your energy? Maybe it's the clutter in your room. Maybe it's the message you've been meaning to send. Maybe it's the goal you keep delaying because chasing it means facing your fear. Whatever it is, name it. Then take action. Not perfectly, but clearly. Because the longer disorder lingers, the more it robs you. Not in dramatic explosions, but in subtle ways, in stolen mornings, in scattered focus, in the erosion of self-trust. You won't collapse in a single moment, but you will fade over time. And that slow fading is far more dangerous because you don't see it until it's too late. Order is the antidote.
Not for the sake of control, but for the sake of freedom. When you create order in your space, your thoughts, your schedule, you stop merely surviving your days and begin shaping them. You reclaim the ability to choose to act, to live with direction. And that at its core is what Stoicism really teaches. Life isn't something to dominate, it's something to design with intention, with structure, and with peace. And once you understand how disorder quietly weakens you, you begin to see another test just as dangerous: success. Because success has a way of softening you if you're not careful. Failure is loud, it crashes, it burns, it humbles you. But success whispers. It tells you you've done enough, that it's okay to let go of the sharp edge that once kept you hungry. It lulls you into comfort, into believing the fire that got you here can finally rest. But that's the moment erosion begins. Not collapse, not crisis, just a slow drift into softness.
The Stoics understood this well. They never glorified external success. To them, achievements were never the destination, just to stage a new environment in which discipline would be tested again. Even Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man of his time, wrote nightly reminders to himself about humility, restraint, and keeping his fire alive. Not because he was weak, but because he knew how easily strength can dull when everything seems to be going your way. Think about your own life. You grind, you resist distractions, you stay consistent. Then it pays off, you get the promotion, the recognition, the breakthrough. And subtly your behaviour shifts. You sleep in a little longer. You skip one workout. You tell yourself you've earned a break. Not true rest, but a break from the very habits that got you to the top. And that's a trap. What carried you to the summit won't keep you there.
The moment you stop sharpening your edge, decline begins not with a bang, but with compromise. The Stoics warned us success is not completion, it's an invitation to even deeper discipline. Rest is not the enemy, strategic rest is essential. But there's a vast difference between resting to recover and surrendering to ease. One builds strength, the other seduces you into stagnation. And stagnation feels safe, which is exactly why it's so dangerous. You see it everywhere, the relationship you stop nurturing because you think love maintains itself, the body you neglect, because you tell yourself you've earned the junk food, the growth you abandon because you think you've learned enough. It's not failure, it's drift. Quiet, subtle, and corrosive. To stay sharp, you need a shift in perspective. Success is not the finish line, it's a checkpoint.
A chance to ask what still needs refining. Where have I started coasting? What part of me have I stopped challenging? That's what keeps your blade sharp, not fear but responsibility, not guilt but gratitude expressed through continued effort. In the beginning, discipline is fueled by hunger, by pressure, by the need to prove yourself. But once you've achieved something, that fuel runs out. You can't rely on it anymore. Now discipline must be driven by something deeper, devotion, integrity, the love of the process itself. You no longer show up because you're desperate. You show up because you're committed. And that is where true excellence begins. Staying ready isn't something you switch on and off. It's part of who you are. True excellence isn't a sprint. It's a lifelong relationship with your own standards. You don't lower them just because you've reached a milestone. You raise them because now you have the strength and the space to go further. The Stoic path was never about chasing perfection. It's about sustaining intention. It's about remembering that success is not an excuse to coast. It's a reason to refine. So if you're in a good place right now, strong, stable, respected, that's good. But don't let it become your ceiling. Treat it as your foundation, not your finish line. Keep showing up. Keep asking more of yourself. And if you've drifted, if you've grown a little soft, don't drown in guilt. Just return, recommit, restart the fire. Because the truth is simple discipline built the life you have, and only discipline will keep it alive. Now here's the next timeless law. What you do daily when no one is watching reveals whether your fire is still burning. Too many mornings are lost because we wait. We wait to feel ready. We wait for motivation to arrive, for the fog to lift, for energy to magically appear like a signal from the universe that now finally this is the moment to begin. But it doesn't come. Not when you want it, not when you think you need it. That's because motivation is not the starting point. It's the side effect. The Stoics knew this centuries ago, and neuroscience today confirms it. Action creates momentum, not the other way around. The mind, however, craves comfort. It negotiates with you. It whispers, "You're tired. One more hour won't hurt. Today's not the right day." And if you wait for that voice to quiet, you'll be waiting forever because it never stops. It only changes its disguise. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel, it asks what you value. It doesn't grow from emotion, it grows from principle. Epictetus didn't say act when it's easy. He said first decide what kind of person you want to be and then act like it. Not when you feel like it, but because that's who you're becoming. Think of a sculptor. He doesn't wake up wondering if today is the day he feels like chiseling. He shows up because the craft matters more than his mood. He picks up his tools. He begins. And somewhere between motion and resistance, something shifts. Focus arrives. Clarity returns. Not because he waited, but because he moved. We live in a culture obsessed with the idea of readiness, the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect energy. But life doesn't wait, time doesn't pause, and your potential doesn't care about your feelings. The longer you delay, the more you drift. The act of moving, especially when you don't feel like it, is the very thing that brings your strength back to life. If you want to build something real, a resilient mind, a stronger body, a life you're proud to live, you can't keep asking for permission from your emotions. You must move, especially when you don't feel like it, because that's when it matters most. That's when you carve the inner signal that declares I lead. My moods follow. So let's bring this down to earth. You don't feel like training today, fine. Don't commit to an hour.
Just put on your shoes and step outside for 5 minutes. You don't want to write open your document and write a single sentence. You've been avoiding a difficult conversation. Set a timer for 10 minutes and begin. You're not chasing perfection, you're initiating motion. Because once the body moves, the mind catches up, and what felt impossible begins to feel inevitable. The Stoics knew this truth well. The hardest moment is always the first. The breath before the leap, the heartbeat before the yes. Inside that tiny window lies everything, your proof, your potential, your power. It's not about grand gestures, it's about something consistent, something honest, something that quietly says to yourself and to the world, I will not be ruled by passing moods. So reflect, what have you been postponing simply because you don't feel ready? And who could you become if you stopped waiting for that feeling altogether? Imagine a life where your actions aren't chained to emotion.
Where you show up not because you're in the mood, but because the mission requires it. That is Stoic strength. That is inner authority. And here's the shift when you learn to move without waiting for motivation. Discipline stops being something you force. It becomes something you embody. It becomes who you are. Now let's go deeper. Because the next law reveals something even more powerful: the people around you. Who fuels your discipline and who quietly erodes it? Law 6. Live by conscious choice, not auto-reaction. How much of what you do each day is truly chosen, and how much is just inherited noise playing on repeat? At first glance, that question feels simple, but sit with it long enough and it shakes the foundation of your entire life. Because most people aren't truly living, they're reacting. Reacting to old expectations, old habits, scripts. They never wrote roles they never agreed to. We wake up, grab our phones, scroll without thought, chase goals we never examined. Not because we deliberately chose them, but because they became familiar, automatic, safe. The Stoics warned us about this drift centuries ago, and much later Carl Jung echoed the same idea. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That is the danger. When reactions go unchecked, they begin to define you. Over time, you mistake the pattern for your personality. You say, this is just who I am, but it's often not. It's not your true self. It's the self you became by default, not by design. True discipline isn't just about working hard, it's about waking up. It's about becoming deeply aware of what truly drives you, and then choosing moment by moment how you want to respond. Discipline isn't about clenching your teeth and forcing yourself through every task. It's about asking better questions. Why am I doing this? Is this my voice or someone else's? Did I choose this path or did I inherit it without even realizing? The truth is, a lot of what we call discipline is just conditioning. Maybe you learnt somewhere along the way that achievement is the only way to feel worthy, so now you grind yourself into exhaustion and call it ambition. Maybe you learned that keeping the peace meant avoiding conflict, so now you silence your truth and call it maturity. Or maybe someone once told you that your desires were too much, so you learned to settle, and now you call it being realistic. But these aren't conscious choices. They're survival mechanisms. They don't just take up mental space, they shape your future. That's why the Stoic path begins with clarity, the willingness to stop, to reflect, and to question the quiet scripts that have been running in the background of your mind. You begin to notice the pause before the automatic yes. You catch the impulse before it becomes action. And in that space you ask, is this really me or is this just habit? Is this alignment or is this repetition? Living by conscious choice doesn't mean rejecting your past, it means examining it with honesty, keeping what strengthens you, letting go of what confines you, and reshaping what demands evolution. That's where discipline transforms into inner architecture. It's not just about doing hard things, it's about doing the right hard things. The ones aligned with your values, your nature, and your direction. In practice, this doesn't have to look dramatic. It could be as small as replacing your morning scroll with 5 minutes of stillness. It could mean catching yourself in the middle of frustration and choosing curiosity instead of anger. It could mean finally releasing a story you've been carrying for years, the one that whispers, "You're not ready, not smart enough, not the kind of person who gets to choose differently."
These moments may look small from the outside, but they're revolutionary because they are no longer automatic, they're deliberate. And that difference between impulse and intention is what turns life from something you endure into something you actually live. The Stoics never believed in controlling everything around you. They believed in controlling your relationship to what happens. And that kind of control always begins with choice. So take one pause today, even for a moment. Inside that pause lies the doorway back to yourself. Ask yourself, where in your life are you still running on default? What routines or reactions feel more inherited than chosen? And what would it look like to act not from habit or fear, but from presence? Because the true strength of discipline isn't just in the doing, it's in the deciding. It's not about forcing yourself through life, it's about shaping it one conscious choice at a time.
And once you begin choosing with awareness, the next step is to protect that awareness by becoming mindful of your environment. Because who you surround yourself with will either reinforce your clarity or slowly dissolve it. Which brings us to the next law: what you do in private defines you in public. Character is not built under the light, it's built in silence in the unglamorous hours when no one is watching, no one is praising, no one is keeping score. That is where the real foundation is laid. In the choice to rise when you're tired, in the promise you keep when there's no reward, in the small invisible habits you uphold when applause will never come. The Stoics understood this well. Who you are in private becomes who you are in public, not the other way around. But we live in a culture that reverses this, a culture where performance is everything, where social media rewards visibility, not depth, where moments are praised, not patterns.
Where image is celebrated, not integrity, but public respect without private integrity is a house built on sand. It might look strong for a while, but eventually the mask slips, and what remains is not what you presented, but what you practiced. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome, yet every night he returned to his journal not for the empire, not for his legacy, but for himself. He knew his true opponent wasn't out there. It was within his ego, his impulses, his comfort, and that inner battle had to be fought daily in the shadows. In everyday life, it's no different. Anyone can give a powerful talk, but do they listen with patience when interrupted at home? Anyone can post a quote about self control, but do they hold their tongue when anger flares? Anyone can look disciplined when the coach is watching. But what about when the room is empty? No deadlines, no eyes, just you. That is where legacy is written.
Not in one impressive act, but in your consistent relationship with the unseen. It's the morning you rise without applause, the night you sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, the moment you step away from the easy path even though no one will ever know. These moments may feel invisible, but they shape you. They deepen your roots. And the deeper the roots, the stronger the life that grows above them. There's also a powerful psychological truth here. When your private choices match your values, you gain something priceless: self-trust. Not confidence for show, but a quiet, grounded trust. The kind that doesn't need validation because you've already witnessed your own integrity. When you know you'll follow through even in silence, your presence shifts. You walk differently. You speak with quiet conviction. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you've already impressed something permanent onto your soul. But the opposite is just as true. When you lie to yourself, when you cut corners, no one else will see it, never stays hidden. It follows you. It colours how you move through the world. Self-betrayal rarely shouts. It speaks in hesitation, in over-explaining, in quiet doubt. And slowly it erodes the most important belief you can carry, the belief that you can rely on yourself. That erosion is subtle, but it's powerful. This is why Stoic discipline was never about showing off. It's about showing up for yourself, especially when no one else is watching. It's about treating solitude as sacred. Not as empty time, but as a proving ground, a space where you mould the version of yourself that the world will eventually meet. So ask honestly, who am I when the lights are off, when the door is closed, when there's no audience? Because that version, the one without filters, without scripts, is the one building your future.
And the more aligned that private self becomes, the more effortless it feels to lead, to create, to act in public. Because at that point, you're not performing, you're simply being. And now that we've uncovered the quiet roots of character, it's time to look at another challenge, one that lives not in silence, but in stimulation. Law 8. Tame the dopamine. Rewire the reward. If your mind feels restless, scattered, pulled in 1,000 directions, it isn't because you're weak. It's because your biology has been hijacked. We are living in a world engineered for stimulation, endless scrolling, sudden pings, flashing updates. Every corner of modern life is designed to spike your dopamine to keep you chasing what's fast, easy, and shallow. The real danger is that it begins to feel normal, so normal that we stop questioning it. But the Stoics would ask, does this habit serve your soul or just your senses? Because not everything that feels good is good for you.
And not everything that feels uncomfortable should be avoided. The Stoic path to discipline begins with this truth: not all rewards are equal. Some are loud, instant, and empty. Others are quiet, slow, and deeply fulfilling. Discipline is learning to tell the difference. It's retraining your brain to stop chasing the cheap and start building what actually lasts. Dopamine itself isn't the enemy. It's simply how your brain learns what to return to. But in today's world, that system is flooded. Every notification, every new video offers a quick hit. Your brain begins to associate pleasure with ease, not with effort. And then when it's time to sit still, to focus, to work, your mind revolts. It whispers, "This is boring. Give me something new." That resistance you feel, that urge to click away to escape, that isn't proof of weakness. It's the conditioning of a distracted world. The Stoics wouldn't tell you to reject pleasure. They would tell you to elevate it.
To stop rewarding yourself with noise and start finding reward in substance. Not the rush of checking a feed, but the quiet pride of finishing what you started. Not the thrill of being seen, but the deep fulfillment of keeping your word. Not the escape of consumption, but the strength of creation. That's a shift. And yes, it takes effort. It requires you to redesign your environment so the path of least resistance points toward your values. Keep your phone out of reach when it's time to focus. Replace the morning scroll with 5 minutes of breathing and intention. Read instead of browse. Walk instead of swipe. End your day not with one more dopamine spike, but with silence and reflection. These aren't random habits. They're acts of rebellion, small but powerful defiance against a world that profits from your distraction. And if you stay consistent, change begins. Slowly, quietly, but powerfully, your brain rewires. You begin to crave what builds you.
You find joy not just in starting, but in finishing. Presence itself becomes more satisfying than stimulation. This is how you tame dopamine, not by denying yourself joy, but by redefining it. You stop settling for crumbs of pleasure and start building a feast of meaning. Because true satisfaction doesn't shout, it whispers. It emerges from effort, from completion, from being fully present. So pause and ask yourself, where are you still chasing what drains you? What habits reward your impulses but rob your clarity? And what would happen if you replace those shallow spikes with structure, with silence, with something that lasts? Your mind isn't broken, it's trained. And the same way it was trained to crave distraction, it can be trained to crave discipline. And once that inner chemistry begins to shift, the next step is anchoring it with something unshakable, a personal code you refuse to break. Law 9 structure is a form of mercy. Too often we treat structure like a prison. Strict schedules, colour-coded calendars, rigid routines, as if committing to structure means sacrificing freedom. But that's only true when structure is forced without understanding. Real structure, intentional, thoughtful structure, isn't a punishment. It's a gift. It's mercy. A shield that protects you from chaos. Not because you're afraid, but because you care enough to design your life instead of just surviving it. Without structure, freedom turns into fragmentation. You may be busy all day, yet nothing truly moves. You bounce from task to task, screen to screen, conversation to conversation, and by nightfall you're drained but directionless. As Seneca said, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it, and most of that waste doesn't come from laziness, it comes from lack of structure. The Stoics weren't against pleasure. They didn't reject joy or flow. What they rejected was aimlessness.
Because a day without structure is a day surrendered to distraction, and distraction over time becomes a lifestyle of constant noise and zero clarity. When you let the loudest voice win, you lose your own. Picture it. You wake up with no plan. The first thing you do is check your phone. You answer a few messages. You open your inbox. Suddenly your day is being dictated by whatever shows up. You follow urgency instead of priority. You drift. By evening you're exhausted but strangely unfulfilled. Now contrast that with a structured beginning. You wake without touching your phone. You sit in silence. You stretch. You journal. You already know your first priority, so you don't waste energy deciding what to do. By noon, your most important task is complete. That's not robotic, that's alignment. That's structure working for you, not against you. Because real structure doesn't mean more work, it means less wasted effort. It transforms your energy from scattered reaction into intentional creation. And in that shift, you rediscover a freedom far deeper than chaos could ever offer. Structure is not about walls, it's about windows. It's the filter that clears away the noise, so what truly matters can rise to the surface. When you build a structure around your values, you don't restrict your life, you give it shape. And that shape becomes a container for your energy, your creativity, and your discipline. Even artists, thinkers, and so called free spirits thrive when they honor structure. Not rigid timelines, but sacred boundaries. Time carved out for deep work. Simple rituals that signal focus. Environments designed to nurture flow. Creativity doesn't suffocate inside structure, it's unleashed by it. Because when your mind is no longer busy managing chaos, it finally has the freedom to go deep. And structure isn't just about productivity, it's about your emotional health. When your days are chaotic, your nervous system lives in fight or flight mode. When everything feels urgent, anxiety becomes your baseline. But with structure, your body relaxes, your mind clears. You make room not just for doing, but for resting, reflecting, reconnecting. So ask yourself honestly, where are you still resisting structure? Maybe you fear it will box you in. But what if structure isn't a cage, it's a compass? What if it's the very thing that allows you to move freely without getting lost? Life will pull at you from every direction, and without something steady to return to, you'll be swept away. Structure gives you something to hold, a rhythm that says, this is where I begin, this is where I return. It doesn't silence your spontaneity, it holds it, it gives your effort a home. So give yourself that mercy. Not more rules, but more rhythm. Because the more structure you create around what matters, the more space you'll feel inside.
And in that space, discipline stops being a grind. It becomes who you are. And now that the shape of your life is becoming intentional, it's time to look at the voice you carry into the world and how self-respect changes the way the world listens. Lord 10 act like the person you are becoming. Every decision you make is more than a choice. It's a vote, not just for your future, but for your identity. Every time you say yes or no, every time you show up or step back, you are shaping the person you believe yourself to be. You're not just building habits, you're rehearsing a self. The Stoics weren't interested in surface level actions, they were after transformation. Not behaviour for its own sake, but character and identity that flows naturally from who you've chosen to become. So ask yourself, who are you becoming? Not in theory, not in some distant future, but right now. In the way you rise from bed, in the way you respond when you're frustrated, in how you treat your body, your mind, your word. Are your actions aligned with the person you say you want to be, or are they still echoing the older version you claim to be leaving behind? If you want to become disciplined, focused, calm, powerful, then you must start acting like that version of yourself today. Not when it's easy, not when the stars align, but here in the mess and movement of your ordinary life. Because who you practice being in the small moments is exactly who you become in the big ones. Identity-based discipline is different from short-term motivation. It doesn't ask you to fake it, it invites you to practice it. Imagine you want to be a writer. The old version of you waits for inspiration. But the writer you're becoming shows up every morning, even if the words stumble onto the page. You want to be healthy. The old you negotiates with a gym, bargaining with excuses. The disciplined you treats movement as a sacred ritual, not a burden. You want to be emotionally strong. The old you reacts impulsively. The new you pauses, breathes, chooses carefully. Every moment is a fork in the road. You're either reinforcing who you were or rehearsing who you're becoming. But don't confuse this with pretending. It's not about putting on a mask, it's about training. You don't fake calm, you practice it. You don't force confidence, you build it through repetition until it becomes part of you. And slowly the imagined future version of yourself begins to feel real, even familiar. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He didn't just write about wisdom or temperance. He practiced them day after day in the solitude of his journal. He examined his actions not to defend them but to align them. Because identity isn't fixed, it's sculpted, chiseled out of your choices, moment by moment, day after day. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Becoming new requires leaving behind what's familiar, the old excuses, the old reactions, the old stories you've told yourself. That's why staying the same feels easier. Change requires not just effort, but honesty. The kind of honesty that asks, am I willing to give up who I've been for the chance to become who I could be? The path forward is simple, but never easy. Act like the person who follows through. Act like the one who guards their time, who protects their energy, who speaks with integrity. Not perfectly, but deliberately. Because every act is a signal, a quiet message to your future self. This is who we are now. And when your actions begin to align with your ideals, your emotions follow. Your confidence grows. Your identity stabilizes. Because discipline was never just about effort, it was always about embodiment. And the more you embody the person you're becoming, the less effort it takes to remain that way. Integration happens, the chaos fades, the identity sharpens. And what comes next is no longer about pushing harder, it's about moving forward with grounded clarity. Law 11. Every minute is a brick in the temple of your life. You're given Psalm 440 minutes each day. Quiet, unmarked, easy to overlook, but each one is a brick. And whether you realize it or not, you're always building something. The question is never, do I have time? The real question is, what am I constructing with it? The Stoics were obsessed with time, not because they feared death, but because they understood how sacred each moment is. Seneca once wrote, people are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. Everything else in life can be regained, money, possessions, even relationships. Time cannot. Every minute lost to distraction, to indecision, to avoidance, that's a brick misplaced. And a life built on scattered moments will eventually collapse under its own weight. You may not notice it today, but the structure you live in is already shaping itself. And in time it becomes the world you wake up to. Think of someone you deeply admire, not just for their success, but for their steadiness, their depth, their presence. That kind of person wasn't built by one dramatic choice. They were built in silence, minute by minute, in the way they focused, in the way they responded to difficulty, in the way they kept showing up when it would have been easier to step back. And let's be clear, this isn't about squeezing productivity out of every second like a machine. It's about clarity, about intention. Spend 30 minutes scrolling and it feels harmless. But repeat that daily and you lose 11 entire days every year to nothing. Now flip the script. Write for 30 minutes a day, and in a year you've written a book. Read for just 15 minutes a day and you've absorbed libraries of wisdom. Reflect for 10 minutes and your entire way of thinking begins to shift. That's the point. Discipline isn't about doing more. It's about building with what you already have. One brick, one breath, one moment at a time. The Stoics journaled not because it looked impressive, but because they knew that if they didn't shape their days would shape them. They understood there is no neutral. Every minute is motion towards something or away from it. So what does this look like in practice? You wake up and instead of grabbing your phone, you breathe. You reflect. That's a brick. You choose to work on one meaningful task instead of chasing 10. Another brick. You walk when you'd rather scroll. You pause when you'd rather react. You follow through when quitting would be easier. Brick by brick by brick. Until one day you look around and realize you haven't just survived time, you've built with it.
So ask yourself right now, what am I constructing with my minutes today? Does this moment carry weight? Because the temple of your life is not built someday, it's built now. Every decision is a stone laid, and every delay is a stone missed. And once you understand that you're ready for the final truth, discipline isn't just about doing. It's about remembering what truly matters in a world determined to make you forget. Law 12. If you don't measure it, it's not growth. You say you want to improve. You want to grow, to evolve, to become stronger. But how do you know if you're truly moving forward? If you're not measuring, you're only guessing. And if you're guessing, you're drifting. That's the quiet truth most people avoid, because a measurement demands clarity, and clarity forces you to confront what's real. Not what you hope, not what you assume, but what is. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology confirmed it. Without self-examination, there is no transformation.
Without reflection, effort becomes noise motion without direction. You cannot improve what you don't track. You cannot refine what you don't observe. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence then is not an act, but habit. But habits don't form by accident. They form by design. And design begins with attention. Attention comes from tracking. Not to shame yourself, but to illuminate the path. This isn't about turning your life into a spreadsheet. It's about making your growth visible, measurable, tangible. Think of it this way. Would you try to build a house without ever checking your measurements? Of course not. Would you try to steer a ship without checking your heading? You'd drift. Yet so many of us try to build a purposeful life without checking in, without asking, am I on course? And then we wonder why we feel stuck, disconnected, or aimless. It's not laziness, it's blindness. We work hard, but often in the wrong direction. So let's make it practical. Do you know how often you break your own promises? How many hours slip into distraction? How many days you actually follow through on what you said mattered? Without measurement, these answers stay blurry, and vagueness is the enemy of progress. But the moment you start tracking even a little, everything begins to shift. You see your patterns, you notice the excuses you lean on, you spot the moments where you collapse, and that awareness gives you something powerful: choice. The Stoics practiced this daily. Marcus Aurelius ended his nights with reflection. What did I do well? Where did I fall short? What can I improve tomorrow? That wasn't performance, it was alignment, a compass for his character. Over time, these small reflections become your edge. You stop repeating mistakes on autopilot. You start adjusting with purpose. That's how real growth happens. Not through a single breakthrough, but through daily calibration. Maybe for you, it's journaling.
Maybe reviewing your goals every Sunday, or simply writing down one win and one loss before bed. It doesn't need to be complex, it only needs to be consistent. Because when you measure your effort, even when no one is watching, something shifts deep inside. You begin to respect your path. You stop seeing discipline as something forced and start seeing it as something you build brick by brick, pattern by pattern, choice by choice. And when you see your progress clearly, you stop hoping you're changing, you know you are. Now the foundation is laid, and here's the truth. This isn't the end of the work, it's the beginning of discipline taking form in your life. So pause and ask, where am I still moving blindly? What would change if I measured with presence instead of chasing perfection? Because discipline without direction fades into noise, but discipline with awareness becomes power. The Stoics showed us that true structure is not a cage, it's a path, a way to bring chaos into calm, a way to align your days with who you are meant to become. You don't need to be flawless, you just need to return to what matters again and again. Lay the brick, hold the standard, and when you fall, rise clearer. Each choice is a quiet declaration: I am not drifting, I am becoming. So if this spoke to you, subscribe to Stoicism Breath and leave a simple comment below. Stay disciplined, keep walking with intention. Your future is being built in what you choose next. The next episode will meet you there.